Well, welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, we're going to be talking about, is your anxiety or your partner's anxiety destroying your marriage? So as soon as I said that, I'm reminded of what we just prayed about, which is that this is a judgment-free zone. We're here to walk with you there's 365 places in the Bible where it's like, fear not, or some version of that. So the Lord knows that we humans have our issues with this. So we don't want to come across as judgmental in any way, shape, or form. But I will tell you, this is a huge deal. If you're struggling or your partner's struggling with anxiety in your relationship, that is something to pay attention to. And if you don't, then what's going to happen is it will eventually be something that has to be paid attention to. It cannot be avoided. So we want to be able to take a look at this in a way that brings light, that brings encouragement, and brings some hope to those that are struggling with this, either in themselves or with their partner. I'm with our favorite licensed professional counselor, Kyle Hargrove. And we're going to shed some light on this topic. But my guess is, Kyle, this is something you see in your office on a regular basis, this whole thing about anxiety.
I would say it is the regular basis. And more so now than ever before. And just to tag team on your comment about this is a no judgment zone, a judgment-free zone. I don't know anybody anywhere that doesn't struggle at some level with some anxiety. So it's not like we can stand back and point our fingers or talk down our noses to anyone about their issues with anxiety, because we are all anxious about something or some things. And I think a lot of times the people that appear the least anxious are perhaps covering for something. And that's it's a coping mechanism. Overconfidence usually indicates insecurity.
Sure.
And we all know some overconfident people. So understand that when we say anxiety, this is not something where, we're going to separate the wheat from the chaff, or throw this group in one pen and this group in another pen, say these are the anxious ones and these are the non-anxious ones or anything like that, because we all are. Some of us allow it to direct us more so than we're comfortable with or that other people are comfortable with. And some of us manage it pretty well.
Yeah, I can say from my own personal experience, I used to be upside down in this department, really, really fearful, worrier, all of that. And it went right along with being a perfectionist. And I got reformed in that space on a few levels. But even with that, occasionally there are things where I catch myself as like, oh, Nina, you're worrying, and I hate the way that feels. And I can't imagine that being a daily experience for people, but it is. There's people that live in that all the time.
Absolutely. And I can't think of anything more disconcerting or even physically uncomfortable to me than an overburden of anxiety. But let's look at the etiology of it for a minute, if we could, because I know this is overly simplistic, but it's the only way I can understand things is to make them that way. We all know someone who is extraordinarily angry and bitter all the time. Okay, no names, please. But we all know somebody who fits that mold, and it doesn't matter what's going on. They're going to find a cause to be upset, angry, bitter about, and they're not happy unless they're mad. Okay, that person. Okay, just not raising hands, and we're not using names. So we also know people who are hand wringers. They're just all the time. I mean, they have to put lotion on, and moisturize, because other than that, otherwise they would rub the skin right off their hands. And I say that both literally and figuratively,
right?
Because there are people whose lives are dictated by their anxiety, and they worry, and they live the majority of their lives in a state of fear. And we won't use names there either. But these people are living in opposite lands, opposite worlds. The angry, bitter people are living in the past. They're angry and bitter about things that have happened, about ways they've been victimized, about things, obviously, that they can't go back and control. And I love the idea of not tripping over something that's behind you. And this is what angry, bitter people do every day.
Yeah.
They continue to trip over things that are behind them. They're over, they're done, and they can't let them go.
Mm-hmm.
The other world is the future. And that's the world of the worried, anxious, fearful person. What might happen? What could happen? The possibilities and how bad they are. This is another terrible place to live because it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Either one of those places is, I'll tell you what, it's exhausting to be with a person that lives solidly in one of those places.
Yeah, that's so true. You have all the negative impact for yourself and for them. And there's research now saying it actually damages your brain to be around that and shrinks the part of your brain that is common sense and making good decisions and all of that. So you set yourself up to be even worse off when you're stuck in this.
Yeah. The greatest tragedy, though, I think, of the energy that's expelled and the exhaustion that occurs for the people living in the past or living in the future is that the truth is they live in the present. Their body and their mind and their brain is right here in today, but their emotions are somewhere else.
Okay.
And they're spending all their energy in those places, and they don't have anything left for right now. I believe too that the past and the future are virtually godless places. God is no longer in the past. Past has happened. He's done. He's moved on. So living back there is living in a godless place. God's in today. He's the God of today, the God of the now. Not the God of yesterday, and not the God of, he will be the God of tomorrow when we get there.
Well, it's us getting there because he may be able to transcend time, but we don't.
He's got this down, but we're not him. Yeah. So we expend all of our energy in places where we weren't designed for us to be. God said that, he is the here and the now, and he intended that, I think, for us to recognize that's where we need to navigate.
But we know people in certain careers that have to look at the past and then make decisions, set things up, and they're looking at the past to fix a problem that occurred and then setting up a system to prevent it from occurring in the future.
Right.
And for a lot of those people, I'm guessing it's not super stressful, but when at some point for some of those people it is, it wrecks them, and it goes from being just information to being worrying and stressful and anxiety. So what's happening in somebody's brain where it moves from just being information to being this anxious type of event?
Well, to start with, you're describing data analysis, and data is emotionless. Data is information. It's numbers. It's rates. It's goals met or not. And as far as the information that data provides, there's nothing to worry or be anxious about where that's concerned. I think where people get wrapped up in anxiety that maybe do that kind of a job or a job similar to that is when their position or their raise or their bonus or whatever is attached to what that data says.
Okay. So
I
it's
think
personal.
the numbers become personal. The information, which was emotionless and impersonal, becomes personal because they have skin in the game somewhere. There's something to be lost if the data says the wrong thing, something to be gained if it says the right thing.
So then that would fit with, where do I get my identity? Even in the work that you and I do, if we have clients that are struggling and we get our identity from their behavior, we're going to feel like garbage and be anxious and worried about them all the time. But if we don't, if we just recognize they're on a journey, they've got their own thing, kind of like, oh, is this like parenting? Maybe a little bit not. Anyway, as I said that, I went, no, it's really
I
different.
love that.
Yeah. But you have that opportunity to attach to literally anything. You can stick your identity on just about anything, or you can just recognize there's not much that we're really attached to. And if we attach to Jesus, we're like, that's the good space. Stay there.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like to look at my role as the little bumpers in the gutters of the bowling alley when they set it up for kids. Okay. It's not my job to make sure that they're right down the middle.
Oh, okay.
It's my job to make sure that they stay within certain parameters as we move through that therapeutic process.
Sure.
It's their job and God's job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not telling God what to do. Please don't hear me say that. But I have to stay out of the way to an extent in order for them to make their own way and then seek God in that process.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's just a gentle touch or pull back in of, let's stay within this and let's keep moving in this direction. But I can't make them go down the middle, and it's not my job to do it. So as someone in the helping profession or a mental health caregiver, my objective is to create options and to see truth and to identify faulty thinking and replace it with healthy thinking that motivates people to change what they say and do and think and feel. It is easy sometimes to insert yourself into the process that determines whether it's successful or not, and to carry that with you as you go. And I think any of us as healthcare providers, mental health care providers, or as counselors, or as mentors, or as coaches, we've got to keep a look on that. And I think we all struggle with it on occasion. Sometimes we just care too much.
Well, and anxiety, I think fear is one of the tools the enemy uses pretty seriously a lot. And so no matter what you do, that's going to be a thing you have to contend with in some way, shape, or form.
It's number one.
Yeah. So what have you found in your career that helps people conquer anxiety?
That is the $64 million question. Because as strange as this comment may sound, one of the greatest challenges to conquering anxiety is identifying where it comes from and why. And anxiety for most people is such a close friend. They don't know how to live life without it. They have been so attached to their anxiety for so long that they don't even realize how significantly it impacts their lives. So when we start talking about how do you move past anxiety, it's it's both a cognitive and an emotional process, because anxiety produces emotion. Let's not let's not kid ourselves about that. But we've got to prove cognitively and behaviorally that many, if not most, of the things that we're anxious about are irrational.
Oh, that's good.
And we have to replace those thoughts with rational ones. And we have to have the opportunity to act that out in some ways. Not everything is a situation where, systematic resensitization, a type of therapy where you put a person in that place, in that fearful place or that traumatic place. You literally physically put them there again.
Yeah.
You go through it with them, but so that they can see that they don't have to worry about this or be anxious about this all the time. Some people are anxious about flying, so we would gradually work them up to a place where they actually get on an airplane and go somewhere.
Yep.
We can't always do that. So we have to give people a skill set, coping mechanisms that allow them, when that situation happens, that they go to this skill now that says, I have a new thing I'm going to do in this situation. And I'm going to trust that it's going to work, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to enjoy the reward from it. And once my brain begins feeling the goodness from that reward, then suddenly my feelings and my thoughts start to change about that situation, about the thing that I'm anxious for. It's tedious. And sometimes it takes quite a long time to not only develop the skill set, but to have the opportunity to practice it in real time, in real life. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we get ready for, it's like getting ready for a game, but the game's not on the schedule. We don't know when it's going to happen, but we have to be ready for it anyway.
That's the hard part, right? Like, I've done public speaking coaching for 30 plus years, and we use prolonged exposure therapy, and it's safe success. You have a success no matter what. Like, it's a win for you in the environment we create. And over time, people, like within 8 weeks, people are confident and they feel good about it. And they actually rate themselves as more confident, feeling better, less stressed, all that. And at the same time, we're forcing them to do the thing every week, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't know. Like right now in our world, we don't know. Is it going to be next week? Is it going to be 3 months from now when, interest rates do X, Y, Z? Or, what's my 401k going to do? And, is there going to be another egg shortage? Or, there's like any given moment, there's 400 things to be concerned about, or there's none. If you just stay off of social media, you have so much less to be afraid of.
Yeah.
But to your point, when you don't have the exposures to these things, the only thing you have is your mind, and really working through the imagination of a successful event. But yet that's work. That takes effort. You have to be intentional around that. And unless you're working with a therapist, like that, the average person doesn't do that.
I know.
That's why there's a market for your services. Is that what you're saying?
But let me give you an example, a real-time example, because and I'm talking about people who are working with a therapist. But last week and this week mark the anniversaries of 2 horrific, tragic school shootings in Texas.
Okay.
This week, tomorrow, I believe, is the first anniversary of one, and last week was the 5th anniversary of another. And double digits of students and teachers were killed in both of these situations. Yeah. So there are people who weren't there, but have suffered greatly with anxiety over this type of situation. It's not just these 2 situations. These are just examples. But our country is wrought, or the world is actually, but our country seems to be more so than others, with these tragic, serial killings, or I don't know, not serial, it's not the word I'm looking for, but where multiple people are senselessly, gunned down or killed. And so it's, the more it happens, the more it becomes something that sits in the corner of someone's mind all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And what's happening in that situation is it's like an app on your phone that you haven't closed. You're not looking at it. You have another app open, or you're on Facebook or something like that, but you have another app that you were looking at earlier and you didn't go back and close it. So it's sitting back in the background of your phone, sucking battery life. Just a little bit, but it's taking it away from you.
Yep. Okay.
So these things, the more they happen, the more they become things that sit in the corner of our mind, and they suck the life out of us. They suck the energy and the ability to feel confident, to say, I'm not going to allow that fear. Because if you think about those in one way, they're not irrational fears. They're things that have happened. If you think about the odds of being a part of that, it is an irrational fear, because the odds are literally infinitesimal. But it's real.
Yeah.
And people carry it with them, and it begins to affect so many different compartments of their lives, that they begin seeing the quality of their life suffer, because they can't function due to the anxiety. and the things that it takes away from us.
I had a moment probably 2 decades ago where there was we'd moved here, been here a couple years, and the newspaper reported this story of these two little boys. One was 9 and the other was 8 or 7. They were brothers, and they were playing in a culvert, and it flooded, and they got sucked down into this culvert, the two of them. And I won't go into the details around it, but they drowned, and they were hugging each other. And that reading the description in the newspaper just shredded my mother's heart. And I lived in fear around something like that happening to my kids. And it was completely irrational, but I was moved to tears over this, for that family, for the mom, for the dad, for the siblings. Like what a tragic loss this was.
Yeah.
And I will not forget how I felt in that moment. Just the terror of that. And I didn't want my kids to go outside and play for about 3 days as I was wrestling through the immense fear that I had around that. And God kept telling me, sweetheart, they're not yours, they're mine. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's not very comforting. I'm sorry.
That's true.
It was just where I was at. And
that's just something we say because we know we have to. We're supposed to say that, but it's really hard to actually feel and live that.
It's like whatever, like I'm walking around with my heart outside my body, and the gut wrenching letting go on a daily basis that you have to do that. And I'm thankful that it's not a huge piece of struggle for me, because I've had enough little things like that, but there are people that live like this all day long.
Yeah.
And then being in a place where you, like, I feel so wildly grateful that that's not like the place my brain flies all the time. I don't think I could, like, you don't sleep when you're like that. You can't eat anything. You can't, it's this constant state of helplessness.
Yes.
And so what do you recommend to people? Like, what's the process for somebody that is dealing with these things? Like, you don't know when they're going to happen, haven't even happened to you. It's just on the news or whatever, or you've seen it in your community, but you don't even know anybody that's happened to. Like, it's the stuff that's irrational, but also rational at the same time, because they actually happened. So what do you do with that?
Funny you should ask. I take a little bit of I think wisdom from something that really doesn't have anything to do with anxiety at all. If you know me, you know that one of my favorite things to teach people is the communication method through transactional analysis. The communication theory that puts people in their transactions with other people in one of three different ego states. They're either communicating as a parent, as a child, or hopefully as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in the description of what each one of these ego states is, I'd like to share with you a couple of things that are inside that adult ego state, which is the ideal ego state from which we should interact with other people. Mm-hmm. Because in the adult ego state, we operate in the here and now. We make sure that our processes are rational. And what we do is based on facts. Okay. Here and now, rational, based on facts. No more, no less. And when, when I'm working with people who are struggling with and suffering from anxiety, this is how we break it down into, here's the simplest form of how we're going to begin taking the anxiety apart, pulling back the layers of the onion, so to speak. Is when I feel anxiety coming on, I'm going to ensure that I am in the here and now, that I'm going to operate rationally and logically, and that anything that is construed or that is someone's opinion or that is a rumor, I'm going to refute. All I am going to take into consideration are what I know to be facts. And that's all. Because what we're going to do, what happens is, when we start cooking with the good ingredients, we start getting good dishes.
Yeah.
We start enjoying the food more. And these are the ingredients, I think, of living a life in reality,
Yeah.
providing the virgin soil for joy to grow, because we're getting out the unconscious contaminants by focusing on here and now, rational, and facts only.
Now that's good. That's absolutely good. And that aligns with what we walk people through in Greater Impact. Let's have a joy-filled life. You got to be joyful yourself first. You can't get that from other people.
Yeah, I don't think Eric Byrne would have ever imagined this being discussed in this way on a podcast like this, but I don't care. It's rich. What he talks about there is rich, and so he's saying to use those same things in our communication instead of using ulterior motives.
Right.
Communicating in a very passive aggressive, which most people do at some level. But I think that they're the perfect solution as well for the laying the foundation, just the groundwork of overcoming anxiety, by saying I'm not gonna focus on anything except these three things.
Well, and you're digging into that relationship you have with yourself in
yes,
that. You're basically
absolutely
parenting yourself, leading yourself, versus being a victim of whatever and yourself, right?
Right. And you're taking some initiative. You're stepping out.
Yeah.
I like to look at it as an adventure. Not everybody sees it that way. But it's an adventure because you're stepping out and the ground is not going to swallow you up, but you don't know exactly how solid it's going to be. So it's not quicksand. We can determine that. But I don't know how solid it's going to be or how confident I'm going to feel when I get there. Well, it's new. You're not going to feel super confident immediately. And that's why I say this is sometimes a lengthy process.
Fair. Yeah. Well, and I want to invite our listeners into a space where you can kind of test drive some of this stuff. We have different names for it, but it's neat to understand how the psychology field takes a look at this, as how counseling's viewing all of these things, which is super cool. And I want to invite you over to our website, greaterimpact.org, where you can grab a free ebook and sign up for our Strength and Dignity membership, which is a women's course, and navigate the tough relationships you've got. And we have a process we teach you in there called the steps, where you interact with yourself differently and interact with God in that process to help you figure some of these things out. And you'll find the podcast and more great wisdom from Kyle inside that space. And you can also subscribe here on this channel and anywhere you can find podcasts. So stick around, check out the next episode. If you're here with us on YouTube watching the video, you got to grab the next one because it'll tell you things about dealing with conflict that'll rock your world. Thanks for being here today. Thank you, Kyle, for these words of wisdom. Hopefully it brings calm and peace and joy where there was anxiety before. So thank you all for being here. We'll talk to you next time.